Insurance is one of those things that we absolutely hate to pay. No offense, Alistair. But when you need it, you need it. And if you don't have it, or if you haven't purchased the right insurance, it is really, really a negative thing. So I want to talk about what are the questions that people should ask when they are searching for an insurance agent. And a lot of the times, insurance can be one of those things that we might think that, oh, they're all the same. As long as, I'm paying for the same deductible or whatnot, all insurance companies are the same, all agents are the same. I kind of get that idea with real estate too, and I know that in our industry, for sure, all of us do not work the same. So Alistair, please speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I just finished a term as the president of the West Michigan chapter of the Mortgage and Lenders Association, so most of my new clients come through the home buying process, and Farm Bureaus position themselves in a spot that we tend to be asked to quote insurance. Why is that? It's not because it's the cheapest all the time. We get beat in price. But there is certain metrics. When you look at home insurance, my dad got mad. I'll tell stories.
Absolutely.
My dad got mad at me last week. He pays for my sister's home insurance. She lost her husband. And so her house is half the size of his. And he's like, why is her insurance twice the price? That's the only reason people call me is when the price changes. They don't, I've got insurance so cheap it doesn't even do its job, right? So it's great, you got cheap coverage, but does it actually do what it's supposed to do? So I had to tell my dad that my sister doesn't pay any bills because my dad pays all her bills, and she's got no credit score. So her premiums are high. So one aspect of insurance is that most companies use the same insurance language. If I went to Citizens or I went to State Farm, we use pretty much the same insurance language. You can add coverages, you can add liability. So if I was gonna buy home insurance or auto insurance today, I'd pick an agent that says, when can I come out to your house? Because when I pull in the driveway, I'm like, oh, you didn't tell me about the camper, you didn't tell me about the boat, I didn't know you had a swimming pool. Hey, I see the river's out back here. Are you worried about your basement flooding, right? Things like that. So you can do 1-800 numbers and insure your home for market value, and when you have a bad day, you're gonna be like, well, that didn't work so good. So
I didn't know you did house calls.
I do. I'm gonna have no time left with Kelso next day. So
I know, I was having him do a drive-by yesterday, so.
Yeah. So my number one rule is if you do business with someone, if you have a bad day, they should be able to put you back to the way you were the day before the loss. That's what we say in the insurance world. So if you've got millions of dollars or a rich uncle, you should ask people, how much liability should I have? If you have a home that's got 12-inch colonial trim solid oak doors, don't assume that they're going to know that off an internet lead that's going to work through the system. So all carriers are the same. I'll tell you one more story, then I'll pass on. But I remember when I first started doing insurance, I was really frustrated because one of the other carriers had this water seepage and leakage coverage for $50,000. And I said, why don't we have that? And my mentor said, you do. You have the full limit of your home's coverage A for that. That's actually a limitation of coverage that the other carriers offer. And so it's good to sit down with someone and take that time. I know everybody wants to save money, right? So, but sometimes you got to spend it to cover yourself. So
first off, I just want to know if you can help me find a rich uncle.
Maybe.
All right. So next we're going to talk about stuff with winter. So I know that this has been such a strange season with the early snow, and we've already seen our share of winter weather. So what are some of the main types of claims that you see specifically during this time of year, and especially that could have been avoided?
Yeah, I grew up in Muskegon, so I spent my childhood getting told to go outside and clean the roof off, right? That's what we did. And so my friend just bought a house, and I gave her a roof rake for Christmas. So, okay, I bought myself a roof rake, right? So if I start at the top of the house, we had 2 feet of snow on Thanksgiving, then it melted, right? So this house was newly purchased that my friend has, and there was icicles the size of my arm. And so I'm out there knocking them down, raking roofs as I could. That's our main water is our main loss. I don't care what time of year it is, water damage is our main issue. But the icicles form up, it backs up. I've seen water go 12 feet uphill and then start dripping into a room. So I won't go on the roof anymore, as you won't. But if we see lots of snow, we're definitely asking people to maintain that part. Tim was talking to me about a vacation in California, and I was instantly thought about the 8 feet of snow sitting on top of all the roofs in Lake Tahoe, right? And that's a rare issue for us, but we do see some collapse of outbuildings and sheds and things like that. I have a frost-free faucet at my house, and I walked past it the other day, and even though I shut it off and it's the valve's inside the house, I had a stream of water down to the ground. So I recommend getting inside, shutting valves off. And then just general frozen pipes. People take off. They don't realize that wind can blow up against the furnace vent and shut it down, and so mostly frozen pipes for us. So.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's kind of on to the next section I'm going to talk about. So while the snowbirds are likely off sunning themselves somewhere warmer, when we do leave our homes, especially for any period of time in this time of year, what are some of the things that people should do proactively, whether it's leaving faucets running or having the water completely shut off if they're going to be gone for a period of time, or other things to both protect the contents of our home and also keep our home safe from, potential theft and things like that? What do you recommend?
If I leave for a long weekend, I go down and shut my water off in the summertime even. So if you left for the winter and you didn't shut your water off and you left your heat on 50 and came back to a river runs through it, we would still cover you for that. But you have a duty to maintain your property, and in my mind, it's shut the water off. Technology is really cool. There's these Nest thermostats and things like that. I think Consumers Energy will give you discounts for updating to certain modern day technology where you can see your setup. Our deer camp, we have a camera that faces our thermostat that we can log onto with our phones and see if it gets windy, power goes out, right? So alarms on mechanical systems, you can get furnace alarms, you can get sump pump alarms, you can get various alarms that are not that expensive. Sometimes you can get discounts for having that kind of thing. And then, like the movie Home Alone, shovel your driveway, right? Don't make it look like you're not home, right? Automatic lights, all that stuff's pretty easy. So for us, that's probably the biggest thing. And then this is outside of home insurance. I just wanted to make sure I touch this. Automobiles, if you're wintering and you rent cars or you have family come down and visit you, there's a pretty big shortage from COVID of rental cars and things like that. People always ask me what I should do when I rent a car when I go away for the winter. And I always tell them now, I used to tell them, depending on the airport, if it's a big airport, don't worry about the extra rental coverage. Your car will cover you for collision and things like that. But loss of use is, if I was renting a car and crashed it and you were going to rent it tomorrow and now the rental car company can't make money off him, they're going to charge me for the lost revenue. So there's, it's 8-month, year-long waits to get cars now. And so if I was flying into some little tiny airport in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, I want to pay for that extra rental car coverage. That's probably my most common question this time of year related to any insurance.
That's kind of funny. That's something I never would have thought of. And I once, just a quick story on water, had a client that I had literally helped him purchase a house not less than 2 months before, and he called me absolutely in a panic. They had gone out of the country during, I don't know, this was like December or January, and for whatever reason, the furnace had stopped running. All of his pipes had burst. This is 3,000 square foot house. I walked through that house, and it was a waterfall from the top to the bottom with no heat, and it was really, really, it was catastrophic. So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure for sure. All right, so we're going to move on to one of my husband's favorite subjects, which is sump pumps. So I guarantee my children have a video of my husband, Mark, literally running around in our one little basement room where there is a virtual fountain of water coming from our sump pump. That is, ours has failed multiple times, so he now has alarms on his phone, same thing, that no matter where we are, we see what's going on in our basement. So Elster, when someone has a sump pump, which is a really common thing here in Michigan, what are the things that they should do and the coverages that they should have to help protect themselves?
Yeah, that's probably the most under-asked question, I think, if I was looking at insurance. Some carrier, like we offer a $2,500 standard coverage for sump pump related damage. That doesn't do much, right? It barely dries down carpet and cleans things up. So first step I always do, if you have a finished basement, I'd probably figure $10,000 to $15,000, maybe $20,000, depending on the finish, is the coverage I would add on. Sump pump coverage is not standard coverage. And so I always like to talk to people about that. Floods come in through walls. No one's really got flood insurance unless they're required to. If a pipe breaks upstairs, you have a coverage A, $300,000-$400,000 or whatever of coverage. If a pipe breaks, you'll have $300,000 to $400,000 of coverage for water in the basement. If the sump pump fails, that's where you can really get in limitations. So this house I keep talking about that was recently purchased, I was the lucky recipient of the mop work on a floor drain from the furnace that just backed up last Friday, and it was $600 to get roto-rooted out. That, if you have a floor drain, that's accidental discharge. So if you don't have a sump pump, you don't necessarily need sump pump coverage. Just know that if you're worried about water in your basement from pipes, you've got that coverage standard on any home policy. But if there's a sump pump, I always ask the people, are you worried about water? Have you ever seen it run? I have a friend over in Oxford that I helped to move in, and the sump pump never stopped running. Like, I want extra coverage at that house.
Yeah.
So, and there's alarms, there's discounts for alarms, so.
Yeah, you bet. And we're actually going to cover some of the kind of sewage things later on as we get into Brian and the home inspection portion of this. So I'm going to flip-flop these questions, but I think you can handle that. So our homes are our havens for sure, and they also happen to be a haven for critters. So this time of year, as it's all nice and cozy in our homes, we often see more critters. So what are the factors that cause some of these guys to come from outside to inside? What can we do to prevent them? And the most important question, is all that type of damage that they can cause covered, Elster?
It's not, and there's no insurance carrier that will cover that type of thing. If the damage from the critter happens and then it causes something else to happen, that coverage would be covered. But we look at trees like you'd look at grass. It's not an insurance company's job to maintain your trees around your house, nor the perimeter of it. And so here I go again, this house, turning into a money pit. She gets the keys mid-November, moving in, and inspection looked great, didn't see a mouse, anything. And I'm sitting there on the floor upstairs in the bedroom at midnight, the first night, and you hear something up in the attic, and there's no attic access. So $1,500 later, we're bat-proof. But I still don't know if I paid to eliminate bats, because I was told by the bat guy, he's really good if you need bat help, that a mouse can climb 3 stories up brick to get in. And, we all hear stories that it's a hole like this they can get into, right? Well, why do they want in, right? 2 reasons, food and warmth. So I was like, why would a mouse climb up 3 stories? Because it's how it rises, right? So I paid that $1,500, and they caulked on the bottom and did all this extra stuff around the doors. And so, this is a house, I was just telling him, I walked through with the inspector, and I didn't see a sign of anything. So it's funny how they can get in. Raccoons are probably the worst. If you get trees hanging over houses in cities, they can make a mess pretty quick. So
we wouldn't want one of those as pets, would we?
No.
They're kind of cute, but
exactly. But I was surprised at how much damage they can do. I need to go back to some super quick. Okay. 2 of the biggest claims I had last year were where like water softener companies came out and cut corners and drained the water softener system into the sump pump instead of up and out with a backflow preventer. The guy lost power while his water softener was cycling, and the whole house drained out through the water softener into his sump pump with no power and caused damage. So I don't like seeing laundry sinks going into sumps and shortcuts. Make sure you pay the extra money to get it pumped up and out. So sorry to go back. But.
No, that's good. And that kind of speaks to that whole idea of vet your contractors. Do not go on 1-800, clean my basement, fix my house. without knowing more, unless you've had somebody else that would recommend this person. And sometimes, people on the internet can absolutely be good, but you just want to make sure you're asking the right questions and really making sure that the people who are inside your house doing this type of work are qualified and are not going to cut those corners, because that's so important. There's not a lot of, not a lot of liability to those people when other things happen because they cut corners, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I like the outdoors. I fish and do all this stuff, and so I don't want to kill all the rodents and critters. So I'm the guy that owns a boat, so I've got the mothballs, the dial soap, the dryer sheets, all that kind of stuff. If you go away for the winter, don't forget to do that to your car, too. We get a lot of critter damage in cars, so.
Yeah, that's interesting. We once had an infestation of wasps in the winter in an apartment that we lived in, and I woke up with a wasp buzzing in my hair. And my husband still married me, so that's good. I kind of freaked out on that one. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the weirdest claims that you've seen, things that people might assume would be covered that are not, and other things that people should cover that, like you said, if you don't go to their home, that you may not know about. So boat, RV, golf cart, additional valuables of some sort. What are some of the questions that people don't necessarily think to volunteer that you would ask?
Yeah, grew up in Muskegon, so I got this old jalopy of a boat, and so does my buddy. And I finally did his insurance, and I'm looking through all his stuff, and I said, "Where's your boat insurance?" It's just an old jalopy, not worried about it. And I did his insurance, and I said, "You've got some standard coverages for small boats up to like $1,500, but otherwise, you're on your own." He called me a week later. He hadn't switched to me yet. He's like, "Lynch, my boat got stolen." I said, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, my boat got stolen." And I said, "Well, you could call and file a claim, but I don't know if you'll get any coverage." And he called me back a couple hours later and told me that it's not stolen, it's just at the bottom of the lake, and that muskrats ate the rubber boots. So anything that leaves your insurance follows vehicles, and insurance follows your property. Your liability goes anywhere. If I knock somebody over walking out of here on accident and I get sued, my home insurance will cover me for personal liability. If I ski this weekend and hit somebody, as long as I'm not purposefully trying to cause trouble, I'll have coverage for that. When it comes to property, if you have tractors, snowmobiles, dirt bikes, while you're on your property, knock yourself out. Go for it. And there'll be theft coverage up to like $20,000 for tractors on most policies. But once you get to a certain point that you start taking stuff off your property, whether it's machines, toys, things like that, or high-value items, when we travel, computers, cameras, jewelry, theft is covered differently once you step off your property when it comes to high-end items. One of the limitations of coverage with jewelry is mysterious disappearance if you don't schedule your rings. So we always joke about it. The most popular time for jewelry theft is December and April. It's Christmas shopping and tax time, right? So we tell people, like, if you're going to claim this ring, you're going to have to step back out of the flower bed and throw a rock through the window so you can say somebody broke in and stole your ring. And so, I'm just kidding. That's how you could get coverage. But so we always tell people, like, you have coverage for jewelry on most policies up to a certain limit. But once it starts traveling with you, you want to schedule those items. And what scheduling an item does, whether it's a boat, an RV, or a piece of jewelry, or a computer, is it gives you coverage no matter where you're at. And so, and limitations and deductibles are there. Like, you have a lower deductible, which is nice, and it covers you for all losses. So if Cousin Eddie grabs a hold of your boat and runs it into the dock and it's scheduled, everything's covered the way it would be on a home policy. So I don't care if you're just going to the mailbox with a golf cart. I get a list of every claim that's settled just at Farm Bureau every week. And our running average is $2.2 million for our top 10 claims every week. It's a 52-week average. And they're not the most fun to read. They're graphic. They tell you everything that happened. And we have stuff where people are going to check their mailbox and get hit by cars on golf carts. And so you could have limitations and coverage for stuff like that. So if it moves, if you take it somewhere, schedule it. And people are like, well, I don't want to spend the money on it. You can at least get the liability coverage, the lawsuit side of it. You could insure a snowmobile for $10 a year. We're not going to give you a check if you put it in Lake Mitchell, but we're going to at least cover you if you run into somebody. So scheduled items is huge. you already hit waterfall. I had a guy that accidentally shut off his power instead of the water at his cabin, so came to a waterfall. And so you have a duty to protect your home. That claim, actually, we had to fight. I had to go into subrogation and look at other factors because the company said, well, you shut your water, or you shut your heat off. You didn't shut your water off, so you really willfully didn't protect your property. So you got to be careful. That's where a good agent will come in handy to help you through it.
Are you suggesting there is not coverage for stupidity?
No, we cover stupidity all the time. It just took a minute on that one. So I'm living proof. One of my favorite clients plays in the Chicago Symphony, and he leaves for the weekend, and this is a water shutoff tag. He came home at 3 o'clock on a Sunday last March and said, Lynch, I got water in my basement. I said, where's it coming from? He's like, I don't know, there's water running everywhere. I said, well, don't call me, call a plumber, then call in the claim. We always tell people, if you have a loss, it's your duty to not make it worse. So start calling people, get the restoration companies out there. I didn't tell him to shut his water off. So 5 hours later, I checked back in on him, and I said, hey, how's it going over there? He's like, well, now the water's 6 feet deep. I said, what are you doing? He's like, I don't know where to shut my water off. So all my clients get a water shut-off tag, and they come in handy when you're panicking. So that claim went from a $5,000 claim to about $100,000. So, you know, we covered it. We covered stupidity, right? So you just never know. One other area I think is huge, if you have travel trailers, read the owner's manual. You're required to re-caulk and re-weather seal all your little bump outs and seams every couple years. And so that's probably one of our biggest denied loss is lack of maintenance. Is it not going to be covered? So my funniest story was I lost a hermit crab in my house, and I had a puppy that chewed up some of the linoleum floor in my mudroom, and that crab survived for a month on rotten subfloor. It was a nice house, by the way. Sorry, but it survived for a month on rotten subfloor.
Where are you living,
Alistair? Right? But that floor, you could have fallen through it in a 2008 home because it had rot. Why? Because I didn't maintain my door seal. So if you have damage, don't just assume it's going to be covered. You have to make sure you protect yourself from the elements and things like that. So that's probably where most people get mad. They don't understand how insurance works. So
they don't understand that they actually have to maintain their homes?
Yeah, we had an inspector that was not on the up and up a couple years ago, and I had 4 clients in a row that I helped the lender through the process of getting the home. Within a month, after every client moved in, they called in a claim for a leaky roof or something like that. So it's tough because you don't know how to be an expert. I was just telling him, I walked through this home that my girlfriend just bought. I was over the inspector's shoulder, and I missed septic, I missed bats, so it's hard. But you got to kind of do a walk around. If you can't get on your roof, pay somebody to check your boots and things like that, because that's stuff that'll cause you trouble. You know, if you just let stuff run rampant, they're not going to want to pick up coverage. If you look like you're doing your best to maintain your roofs and things like that, claims go great.
Yep. Well, lastly, it's not uncommon for an older person who actually potentially moves into a senior community or even assisted living to hold on to their house for a while. I mean, often, I usually encourage people to move into those places first, and usually the next immediate step is selling that home or condo. But sometimes people do that with the idea that, hey, this was an injury, I'm going to be back at my house. So I hear stories all the time of homes that sit empty while people have already moved. So, Alistair, if you could address, how do insurance companies feel about empty homes, and how does that work if someone has technically moved into some version of a community and they're still, holding on to that home with the idea that they will be back?
If you ever read the side of a jar of linseed oil, it says may self-combust at a certain temperature, and I had a house fire because a gal just bought a house, finished her floors. She was 60 days after close for possession, spent 30 days fixing it up the floors, and she set the can of linseed oil on the deck and it caught fire. And so the cans really are true.
Wow.
The only reason we covered that fire is because she had brand new beds, brand new washer and dryer, leaned up against the wall. She was about to move in. She'd been there for 90 days. Most companies past 60 days, if a home's vacant, they're not going to pick up coverage. They're going to consider it a vacant home. You can get insurance policies for vacant homes, My office on the lake shore, the house right behind it is a client of mine, and I hadn't seen her car for a couple months. I checked in on them. Mom's in the VA. Okay, is anybody living there? No. All right. How long? We don't know if she's going to come home. And so I said, well, it's a vacant home past too much longer. So I always tell people, if you're going to try and play the game, you better make sure there's bread in the cupboards and milk in the refrigerator and clothes on the closet, because they'll deny claims for that. So get somebody in there, turn it into a rental policy, put a tenant in there. But they know. I know I work with elder law attorneys all the time. Everybody wants to look poor so they can get free long-term care and free housing. And so sometimes you just got to look rich. And unfortunately, when it comes to the deed work, they've changed the look backs and things like that. The saying we say in our industry is you can't insure what you don't own. So if your name's not on the deed and you try and be a named insured, or somebody passes away and the kids try and keep the house in mom or dad's name because it's cheaper, you're going to have a bad day when you really need it. So we just try and help people make sense of it. And, it's BS&A is a website we go to see who owns a home. That's where I start. But, there's some gray area, and so there's some great companies out there that'll give you the benefit of a gray area if there's been a loss. But if it gets to be a large loss, they're going to dig in, and they're going to make sure that they're paying a claim that should be paid.
Yep. And I think that a lot of that just kind of boils down to that idea of having an insurance agent that you trust, that when these situations come up in your life, no matter what the reason, that you would reach out to them and ask those questions. Hey, here's the deal. Mom is moved out of her house. We're not sure if she's going to be back. What are the things that we should do to make sure that if something happens to the house, that loss would be covered? I think that's really, really important.